The emergency beacon flashed red across every screen in the Dravik settlement. Counselor Wraith felt his heart stop as the message repeated itself 3 times. 3 hatchlings were missing, 3 young ones had vanished from the protected nursery compound without a trace. Within minutes the entire Draw community had mobilized, scales gleamed under the twin suns as dragon-like figures rushed through the streets of Verdant Ridge Colony, their massive wings folded tight against their backs. As they moved with desperate speed, Wraith stood at the nursery entrance, his golden eyes scanning the simple room where the young ones should have been resting. Nurse Kala approached him with trembling claws, her voice cracked as she spoke. They were here during morning meal, counselor. I checked on them. Myself, Cyril, Nadra, and Tav were playing with their learning stones when I returned after organizing the afternoon schedules. They were gone. Wraith examined the room carefully. No broken windows, no dummy doors, no signs of struggle or force. The learning stones sat in a neat pile where the hatchlings had left them. A half-finish drawing lay on the floor showing crude pictures of wings spread against a cloudy sky. Have you sealed the compound? Wraith asked. Immediately. Kala confirmed. No one enters or leaves without your permission. The Dravik security chief landed beside them with a heavy thud. His name was Vorin and his dark blue scales marked him as a senior warrior. Counselor, we have found Drags. Smallfoot impressions leading from the nursery garden toward the eastern fence. Wraith followed Vor. Outside, sure enough, tiny claw marks pressed into the soft soil led toward the compound boundary, but something else caught his attention. The fence showed no damage, yet the tracks continued on the other side. They climbed over. Vorin said quietly, the fence is only for marking territory, not for holding determined hatchlings. They left willingly, Wraith stated, feeling a cold weight in his chest. But why? Where would they go? Vorin pointed toward the distant human settlement. The tracks lead that direction. Within the hour, human colonial administrator Patricia Hayes received a formal request for a meeting. She arrived at the Dravik council chamber to find Wraith pacing back and forth, his tail swishing with agitation. Administrator Hayes, Wraith began without preamble. 3 of our young have disappeared. We have reason to believe they may have wandered toward your settlement. Patricia's expression shifted to immediate concern. How long have they been missing? For hours now. Wraith said they are very young, vulnerable. They should never have left the protected areas. I'll alert our security immediately, Patricia offered. We can organize search parties to help look for them. Wraith's wings rustled uncomfortably. That will not be necessary. Our trackers are superior. We simply request that you keep watch and inform us if they appear in your areas. Patricia nodded slowly, sensing the deeper worry beneath the formal words. Counselor, our people care about the safety of all children in this colony. Please let us help. Your offer is appreciated, Wraith replied stiffly, but Dravik Young requires special understanding. We will handle this ourselves. As Patricia left, she couldn't shake the feeling that Wraith's pride might be getting in the way of finding the children quickly. She put out a quiet alert to all human families, anyway, asking them to watch for 3 young Dravik and report any sightings immediately. Meanwhile, Vorin and his tracking team followed the small prints through the grasslands between the 2 settlements. The trail was easy to Follow at first. 3 sets of hatchling. Tracks moving steadily eastward, but then something changed. Counselor. Vorin called out, "You need to see this." Wraith hurried over to where Vorin crouched beside a patch of bare ground. They're clear as sunlight were additional footprints, human footprints. Small ones belonging to human children. How many? Wraith demanded. At least 5 or 6 different humans, Vor reported. All young based on the size. The tracks merge here and continue together. Wraith felt anger and fear mixing in his chest. Human children, his people's precious. Hatchlings were with human young ones. The humans let their offspring roam freely, unsupervised, taking risks that no responsible Dravik parent would ever allow. What if the human children led his hatchlings into danger? What if they encouraged reckless behavior? Follow the trail, Wraith ordered, quickly. Now the combined tracks led toward the human recreation district, an area filled with play structures and open spaces. Wraith had seen it before during diplomatic tour. Human children ran and climbed and jumped there with minimal adult supervision. The very thought made his scales itch with disapproval. When they reached the recreation district, Wraith demanded answers from the first human parent he encountered, a woman named Susan. Looked surprised by the accusation in his voice. Yes, my son David mentioned playing with some Draic kids. Susan said he and his friends went to the old landing field this morning. They've been going there all week to work on some project. The old landing field. Wraith's voice rose. That area is restricted. It has unstable ground and abandoned equipment. Why would you allow your children near such a place? Susan frowned. It's been deemed safe for years. Counselor, the kids play there regularly. They're building something. I think David's very excited about it. More human parents gathered, confirming their children had indeed gone to the old landing field before dawn. They seemed unconcerned, even casual about their offspring spending hours unsupervised in an abandoned area. Ray formed a search party immediately, including both Draic security and reluctant human parents. They moved quickly toward the old landing field, following a worn path through the grass. Hey, as they walked, Patricia caught up with them. Counselor, I think we should approach calmly. The children might be frightened if we come in force. My hatchlings should be frightened. Wraith snapped. They violated every safety protocol. They left protected areas. They associated with species who encouraged dangerous behavior in there. Young Patricia said nothing more, but her expression showed clear disagreement. The search party crested a small hill overlooking the old landing field. Wraith prepared harsh words for whatever foolish game he would find. Then he heard it, laughter, pure joyful laughter echoing across the abandoned field, and beneath that sound something else, a rhythmic whooshing noise he couldn't quite identify. The search party moved faster, clearing the hills, peeked to see what lay beyond. What they saw made every Dravik adult freeze in complete shock. Cyril spread her wings as wide as they would go, feeling the wind catch beneath the delicate membranes. Her heart pounded with excitement and fear as she stood at the top of the wooden ramp. Below her, soft padding covered the ground. To her left, Ben gave her an encouraging thumbs up. Remember what we practiced, the human boy called out. Lean forward, let your wings find the air current, and don't panic if you wobble. We've got spotters everywhere. Cyril looked down at the Other human children positioned around the landing area. Lucy stood ready with a guiding rope. Amy waited near the padding with medical supplies just in case. Two other human kids, David and Rachel, held measuring instruments that Cyril didn't fully understand but trusted completely. "You can do this," whispered Nader from beside her. Her fellow hatchling had already made 3 successful glides this morning. "It feels amazing." Tovik waited at the bottom of the ramp, his wings still damp from his own landing. He waved one claw excitedly. "It's like swimming but in the sky." Cyril took a deep breath and ran forward. Her feet left the ramp. For one terrifying moment, she felt herself dropping. Then her wings caught the wind, and suddenly she was flying, actually flying. The ground stayed beneath her as she glided forward, the air holding her up like invisible hands. She wanted to scream with joy, but remembered Ben's instructions about keeping her body straight. Her wings adjusted instinctively, tilting slightly to catch a crosswind. She soared over the landing pad and touched down with only a small stumble. The human children erupted. Cheers. Lucy ran over and hugged her, carefully mindful of her wings. "That was perfect. You stayed up for 12 seconds." Cyril felt pride swell in her chest. 12 seconds of flight. Back home in the nursery, the caregivers always said hatchlings couldn't fly until their wings fully matured at 15 years old. But here she was only 9 years old, and she had just flown. It had started 2 weeks ago when Cyril had been crying near the recreation district. She'd watched a bird soar overhead and realized she might never experience that freedom. The tragic way was to wait, to stay safe, to protect the young ones until they were absolutely ready. Lucy had found her crying and asked what was wrong. When Cyril explained that her wings were strong but her people wouldn't let her fly, Lucy had gotten a determined look in her eyes. "That's not fair," Lucy had said simply. "If your wings work, you should get to use them." Within days, Ben had recruited other human children to help. They studied Dravik anatomy from public database files. They consulted with the colony engineer about wing loading and weight distribution. They built ramp systems with graduated heights starting at just a few feet off the ground. The human children had tested everything first with weighted dummies shaped like Draic hatchlings. They measured wind speeds at different times of day. They created safety protocols that would make any Draic caregiver proud. If only the caregivers knew about it. Cyril and her friends had sneaked away each morning before the nursery staff woke up. The human children met them at the old landing field, always prepared with new equipment and encouragement. Now, standing in the landing zone with her friends celebrating around her, Cyril felt truly alive for the first time. This was what her wings were meant for. "One more run before we break for water," Ben suggested, checking his watch. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before your parents usually wake up." The hatchlings nodded eagerly. They've been so careful to return before anyone noticed their absence. Just one more flight, then they'd sneak back through the nursery garden fence and pretend they'd been sleeping peacefully all along. Nadra climbed the ramp for her 4th attempt. She'd been working on turning techniques, trying to bank left and right while airborne. Ben had explained how birds use their tail feathers for steering, and Nadra wanted to see if her tail could work the same way. She launched herself with confidence. Wings Spread wide, the morning sun lit up her silver scales as she caught the wind. She attempted a gentle left turn, shifting her weight as Ben had taught. Her wings responded beautifully, carrying her in a graceful arc. Then she saw them do that. A group of adults stood on the hill overlooking the landing field, Dravik adults and human adults together, staring down at the scene with expressions of absolute shock. That Nadra's concentration broke. Her wings faltered. She started to drop toward the ground faster than planned. Nader, of focus. Ben Shait, don't look at them, look at your landing spot. Training took over. Nadra shifted her attention back to the padded area, adjusted her wing angle, and landed hard. But safely. She rolled twice before coming to a stop. The adults on the hill began running down toward them. Cyril recognized Counselor Wraith's distinctive golden scales. Her own mother, Kala, flew down in short bursts, her face twisted with fear and anger. Patricia Hayes, the human administrator, jogged beside them, looking concerned but curious. Everyone, stay calm, Ben said quietly to the other human children. We knew they'd find out eventually. Just stick to the plan, tell the truth. Lucy moved to stand beside the three hatchlings, placing herself slightly in front of them in a protective gesture. The other human children formed a loose circle around their Dravik friends. The adults reached the landing field within seconds. Raid's voice boomed across the space. What is the meaning of this? Cyril, Nadra, Tovik, come here. Immediately, the three hatchlings moved forward slowly, their wings drooping with worry. But before they could reach the adults, Cyril stopped. She looked back at Ben and Lucy, at all the human children who had given her the sky. Then she looked at Counselor Wraith and spoke in a clear voice. We were flying. Kala rushed forward and began examining Cyril frantically, checking for injuries, running her claws over wing membranes to ensure they weren't torn. Flying, you could have been killed. Your wings aren't ready, you're far too young. But we did fly, Nadra said quietly. We flew really well. Wraith turned his attention to the human children, his expression fierce. You did this, you encouraged this reckless behavior, you put our young in danger. Ben stepped forward, meeting the counselor's gaze without flinching. Sir, we would never put anyone in danger. We've been very careful. Raid's laugh was bitter. You built these contraptions and convinced our hatchlings to throw themselves from heights. You call that careful? Patricia moved between them, her hands raised peacefully. Counselor, perhaps we should let the children explain before we make judgments. Rafe looked ready to argue, but then Tove spoke up. They didn't convince us to do anything. We asked them to help us fly. They're our friends. The word hung in the air. Friends, the simple truth of it seemed to drain some of the anger from the Dravik adults' faces, replacing it with confusion and worry. Lucy pulled out her notebook and held it up. We have all our calculations here. We tested everything. We made it as safe as possible. Wraith stared at the notebook, at the careful drawings and measurements filling its pages. Then he looked at the elaborate ramp system, the safety padding, the organized layout of the entire training area. His voice was quieter when he spoke again. Why would you do this? Lucy looked at Ben, then back at Counsel Wraith. She took a breath and answered honestly, because Cyril was crying. Wraith's fierce expression softened slightly. Crying last week near the Recreation District, Lucy continued. She was watching birds fly overhead, and she told me she'd never get to feel the clouds, that she'd have to wait years and years before anyone would let her try. She said her wings were strong enough, but nobody believed her. Cyril's mother, Calla, made a small sound of distress. She hadn't known about her daughter's tears. Ben spoke up. Next, our parents taught us that when someone needs help, you help them, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. But your children yourselves, Wraith protested. How could you possibly know what you were doing? You could have hurt them badly. David stepped forward, carrying a tablet computer. We did research first, sir. We accessed the public medical database and studied Draic wing structure. We learned about hollow bones, muscle-to-toe ratios, and optimal launch angles. He swiped through screens showing detailed anatomical diagrams, mathematical calculations, and engineering principles. Rachel added, we talked to Mr. Harrison, the colony engineer. We didn't tell him exactly what we were building, but we asked him lots of questions about glider design and safety margins. Amy, the smallest of the human children, spoke quietly. I'm afraid of heights, really afraid, but I helped anyway because friends help. Friends even when it's scary. Patricia examined the ramp system more closely. The construction was surprisingly sophisticated, multiple levels allowed for graduated difficulty. The safety padding was professional grade, likely borrowed from the recreation districts. Equipment storage, guide ropes provided. Additional control during landing approaches. You've been doing this for 2 weeks, Patricia asked the human children. 16 days, Lucy confirmed. We started with ground exercises first, wing stretches, muscle building, balance training. Then we used the lowest ramp, only 3 ft high. We worked our way up gradually. Ben pulled a rolled-up chart from his backpack and spread on the ground. It showed a detailed schedule with dates, heights achieved, distances glided, and safety notes. Each successful flight was marked with a green check. Each minor mistake had a red note explaining what went wrong and how they fixed it. We tested everything with weighted dummies first, Ben explained. We made sure the ramps could hold 3 times the weight they needed. 2, we checked wind conditions every morning. We never let anyone fly if the winds were too strong or too gusty. Wraith picked up the chart with trembling claws. The level of planning and care was undeniable. These human children had approached the project with more thoroughness than some Dravic adults showed in their work. Vorin, the security chief, walked over to examine one of the ramps. He tested its stability, checked the joints, and inspected the launch platform. This is solid construction, he admitted grudgingly. Well built. David's dad is a carpenter, Lucy said. David learned from him. He made sure everything was strong and safe. Calla still held Cyril close, her wings wrapped protectively around her daughter. But what if something had gone wrong? What if one of them had fallen badly? What if a wing had broken? Amy opened her backpack and pulled out a medical kit. We have bandages, antiseptic ice packs, and pain medication. Lucy's mom is a doctor, and Lucy knows basic first aid. We also had a communication device to call for help if we needed it. We never needed it, Nadra added quietly, because they were really careful with us. Tove spread his wings fully, showing them to the adults. Look, no damage, no tears, no injuries. We're completely fine. Better than fine, we can fly now. Word fly made Califlin flinch. In Dravik culture, flight was sacred. It represented maturity, independence, and coming of age. Hatchlings weren't supposed to achieve it until their bodies and minds were fully ready. Usually around 15 years old, but looking at her daughter now, Calla saw something she'd never seen before. Confidence, joy. Cyril stood taller, her wings held with newfound certainty. You should see them fly, Counselor Patricia said gently, before you make any decisions. You should see what they can actually do. Wraith looked torn between anger, fear, and curiosity. Finally he nodded stiffly. Show me. Ben turned to Cyril. Do you want to demonstrate? Cyril looked at her mother, asking silent permission. Calla hesitated for a long moment, then slowly unwrapped her wings and stepped back. She couldn't quite bring herself to say yes, but she didn't say no either. Cyril took that as permission enough. She walked to the medium height ramp, not the tallest one, but high enough to prove the point. Human children took their positions automatically, each one moving to their assigned safety spot, ready when you are. Ben called out. Cyril climbed the ramp with steady steps. At the top she paused and spread her wings. The morning sun caught the iridescent scales along the wing edges, making them shimmer with rainbow colors. She looked back once at her mother, at Counselor Wraith, at all the worried adults. Then she ran forward and leaped. Her wings caught the air immediately, spreading wide to capture the wind. She glided forward in a smooth, controlled descent, her body held in perfect position. About halfway through the glide, she attempted a gentle turn, banking her wings just as Ben had taught her. The turn was flawless. She curved through the air like she'd been born to it, her tail providing subtle steering adjustments. She lined up with the landing pad and touched down with barely a stumble, folding her wings gracefully as her feet found solid ground. The human children cheered. Cyril turned to face the adults with her head held high. Callus stood frozen, one claw pressed her chest. Tears ran down her scaled face. But they weren't tears of fear anymore. They were something else entirely. Wraith stared at the young hatchling who had just performed a maneuver that should have been impossible for her age. His voice was barely a whisper. How long did it take you to learn that turn? 3 days, Cyril answered. Ben taught me about weight distribution and air currents. Lucy helped me practice the motion on the ground first. Voron watched as Nadra took her turn next, executing an even more complex gliding pattern with multiple turns. Then Tovik flew, showing off the distance he could cover in a single glide. Each hatchling flew with genuine skill and obvious joy. Patricia stood beside Wraith, watching his face as he processed what he was seeing. Counselor, I know this isn't the Dravik way. I know it seems reckless to you, but look at them. Really look. Wraith did look. He saw 3 young hatchlings who moved with confidence and capability. He saw human children who had dedicated weeks of effort to helping friends achieve their dreams. He saw careful planning, genuine safety measures, and results that spoke for themselves. Behind him, more Dravik families had arrived, drawn by news of the missing hatchlings. Other young Dravik crept closer, their eyes wide as they watched their peers fly. Wraith could see the longing in those young faces, the same longing Cyril must have felt when she cried watching birds point. One of the newly arrived hatchlings Small male named Pell whispered to his mother, "Could I learn to fly too?" His mother's immediate response was, "Absolutely not," but her voice lacked conviction. She too was watching the demonstration with stunned realization. Wraith made a decision that would change everything. Wraith raised his voice so all the gathered adults could hear him. "I want to meet with the Dravidic Council immediately, and I want these human children to attend." Kala looked shocked. "Counselor, surely the children shouldn't be involved in formal proceedings. They created this situation," Wraith replied. "They should help us understand it." 2 hours later, 6 human children sat in the Dravid Council chamber for the first time in colony history. The circular room had high ceilings and perches. Adult Dravic could roost while conducting business. Ben, Lucy, David, Rachel, Amy, and a boy named Chris sat in chairs specially brought in for them, facing a semicircle of Draic elders. Patricia Hayes sat with the children, offering moral support. The 3 hatchlings who had learned to fly sat with their parents in a separate section, required to attend since the matter directly concerned them. Elder Myra, the oldest member of the council, spoke first. Her scales were pale with age, and her voice carried the weight of many years. "Young humans, we must understand your thinking. In Dravic culture, we protect our young above all else. We keep them safe until they're truly ready for independence. What you did violates everything we believe about responsible care for children." Lucy glanced at Ben, who nodded encouragingly. She stood up to address the council. "Ma'am, we understand that our cultures are different, but we saw friends who were sad. We saw friends who had abilities they weren't allowed to use. That didn't seem right to us. It wasn't your place to make that judgment," Myra said, though not unkindly. "These are not your young. They're our friends," David said simply. "Where we come from, that means something." Another council member, a stern-faced male named Tajith, leaned forward. "Friendship does not override safety. You exposed our hatchlings to serious danger." Chris, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "But we didn't, sir. We made it safe. We tested everything. We went slow. We never pushed them to do anything they weren't ready for. And who decides when they're ready to demand it? You children yourselves." Ben stood up beside Lucy. "We let them decide. We gave them the tools and knowledge. They chose what they felt ready to try. Every single flight was their choice." Wraith had been listening quietly, his expression unreadable. Now he spoke. "Tell me about your parents. What do they think of this project you undertook?" The human children exchanged uncomfortable glances. Rachel answered carefully, "We didn't tell them everything. They knew we were working on a building project at the old field. They didn't know exactly what we were building or who it was for." "So you deceived them," Myra said. "We didn't lie," Lucy protested. "We just didn't explain all the details. We knew if we told them they might make a stop. And Cyril really needed to fly." Patricia cleared her throat. "If I may, counselors, I've spoken with the human parents since this morning. While they're concerned their children kept secrets, they're also proud of the initiative, planning, and compassion shown. Human culture values teaching children to solve problems independently, even when those problems put lives at risk." Torg challenged. "We didn't see it as a risk," Ben said. "We saw it as a calculated challenge. We studied Draic anatomy. We consulted Experts without revealing our full purpose. We built in safety measures at every level. We progressed gradually. Over weeks. That's not reckless, that's responsible problem solving. Kala, sitting with Cyril, finally spoke. Her voice shook with emotion. But she's my baby. She's only 9 years old. 9, in our culture that's barely old enough to be away from parental supervision at all, much less attempting flight. Cyril looked at her mother with pleading eyes. Mama, my wings are strong, you've seen it. Now I can fly. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, Caller replied. There are reasons for our traditions. Reasons built on generations of wisdom and experience. Lucy's mother, Dr. Sarah Mills, had been allowed into the chamber. As a witness, she spoke up now. Mrs. Kala, I understand your fear. As a mother myself, I know the terror of watching your child take risks. But I also know that children who are never allowed to challenge themselves never learn their true capabilities. Myra turned her attention to the 3 hatchlings. Cyril, Nadratovic, you violated nursery rules. You left protected areas without permission. You worried your families deeply. Do you understand the seriousness of what you did? All 3 hatchlings lowered their heads. Cyril spoke for them. Yes, Elder Myra, we're sorry we caused worry, but we're not sorry we learned to fly. Why? Myra asked. Why was it so important that you couldn't wait a few more years? Nadra looked up, her silver scales catching the light. Because waiting felt like a cage, Elder. Our wings ought to move. Our hearts wanted the sky. Every day of waiting felt like forever. Tove added. And because we knew we could do it, we felt it in our bones. The humans believed in us when nobody else did. The council chamber fell silent. The adult Dravik exchanged long looks, communicating in ways the humans couldn't interpret. Finally, Wraith stood and walked to the center of the room. I've been thinking about this situation all morning, he said. I have been angry, frightened, confused, but I have also been watching and learning. He turned to face the human children. You show me something today that challenges everything I thought I knew about protecting the young. He walked over to where Lucy's notebook lay on a table. He picked it up and showed it to the council. Look at this. Detailed planning, safety protocols, progressive training schedules. These children approach teaching our young to fly with more care and thought than I have seen in many adult projects. But they're still children, Torgth protested. Playing at being teachers, are they? Wraith questioned. I watched those 3 hatchlings fly this morning. They demonstrated skill and confidence I have rarely seen in Dravik twice their age. That didn't come for play, that came from genuine effective teaching. He set the notebook down and looked at each council member in turn. We have a choice to make. We can punish these human children for violating our cultural norms. We can forbid our young from any further flight training. We can return to the safety of our traditions and pretend this never happened. Or Myra prompted. Or we can learn from this. Wraith said we can ask ourselves difficult questions. Are our traditions serving our young or limiting them? Is there a middle path between reckless endangerment and overprotective restriction? Elder Myra studied the young faces before her, both human and Draic. She saw hope in those eyes, fear too, but mostly hope. What exactly are you proposing, Counselor Wraith? Propose we establish a formal program, Wraith said, a flight training academy for young Dravik supervised by both our Adults and these remarkable human. Children who seem to understand something about potential that we have. Forgot, the chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Torg stood up, his wings spreading in agitation. You cannot be serious. Formalize this dangerous activity with children as instructors, not as primary instructors, Wraith clarified, but as consultants and mentors. They have knowledge we lack. They have a perspective we need. He looked at Ben and Lucy. Would you be willing to help us create a safe, structured program for flight training? One that respects both our need for safety and our young ones' need for challenge. Ben and Lucy looked at each other, then at their friends. Finally, they looked at Cyril, Nadra, and Tovik. The three hatchlings watched them with desperate hope. Ben turned back to Wraith and smiled. Yes, sir, we'd be honored to help. The first official meeting of what would become the Flight Academy took place 3 days after the council decision. Ben stood in the draw community center, facing a room full of skeptical adults and eager young hatchlings. Lucy stood beside him with her precious notebook, now expanded with additional pages of ideas and safety protocols. Voron, the security chief, had agreed to oversee the program's safety aspects. He crossed his arms as he addressed the gathered crowd. Before we begin, everyone must understand this is a trial program. One serious injury, and we shut down immediately. Understood, Ben agreed. That's why safety comes first in everything we do. David set up a presentation using a borrowed projector. The first image showed the ramp system they'd built with labeled safety features highlighted. We'd like to start by explaining our approach, David said. Every piece of equipment serves multiple purposes and everything has a backup safety measure. Rachel walked the adults through their testing methodology. She explained how they'd calculated weight loads, tested materials for stress tolerance, and designed the progression system from lowest to highest difficulty. The Dravik adults listened with growing interest, asking technical questions that Rachel answered confidently. Kala raised her claw hesitantly. I still don't understand how you knew what was safe. For Draic physiology, you're not doctors or scientists. Lucy's mother, Dr. Mills, stepped forward. Actually, they consulted me without realizing it. Lucy asked me dozens of questions about bone density, muscle development, and injury prevention over the past month. She framed them as general curiosity about anatomy, but she was gathering the information she needed. We also watched videos of adult Draic in flight. Amy added, we studied how you move your wings, how you angle your bodies, how you land. We taught the hatchlings based on what we saw you doing naturally. Myra, the eldest council member, studied the young humans with new appreciation. You reverse engineered flight training by observing our adults. Yes, ma'am. Ben confirmed. We figured you already knew how to fly properly. We just had to break down those movements into steps that could be taught and learned gradually. Over the next hour, the human children presented their complete program. Torg, who had been the most resistant council member, found himself nodding along as they explained their progression system. It started with ground exercises to build wing strength, moved to very low glides of just a few feet, then gradually increased height and distance as each student demonstrated mastery. What about instruction? Vor asked. How do we ensure quality teaching? Chris pulled out a training manual he'd been working We've documented everything we learned, every exercise, every safety check, every common mistake we noticed, and how to correct it. Any adult Dravik can use this manual to teach, even if they've never taught before. Patricia Hayes, watching from the back of the room, felt pride swell in her chest. These children had created a comprehensive educational program in a matter of weeks. They'd done it with limited resources, no official support, and nothing but determination and compassion to drive them. Cyril raised her claw in the young hatchling section. "Can I say something?" Myra gestured for her to speak. "Before Ben and Lucy helped us, I thought I'd have to wait 6 more years to fly," Cyril said. 6 years of watching birds and feeling sad. 6 years of knowing my wings could work, but not being allowed to try. That felt so unfair. She looked at her mother. "I know you were protecting me, Mama. I know you love me, but the humans showed me that protection doesn't have to mean stopping me from growing." Nadra stood beside her friend. "They taught us that being safe and being brave can happen at the same time. You don't have to choose one or the other," Tove added. "And they never got tired of helping us, even when we messed up, even when I crashed into the padding 5 times in one day. Ben just smiled and helped me figure out what I was doing wrong." The room fell quiet as the impact of the hatchlings' words sank in. These weren't just children who had learned a physical skill. They'd gained confidence, self-awareness, and a new understanding of their own potential. Wraith stood and addressed the assembly. "I believe we should move forward with this program. With some modifications, I propose that Voren serves as head of safety. Dr. Mills provides medical oversight, and our human friends serve as technical advisors and junior instructors, working alongside Dravik adults. I want to help teach too," Cyril said suddenly. "I know what it feels like to be scared on that first jump. I could help other hatchlings understand it's okay to be afraid." Lucy smiled at her. "That's a great idea. Sometimes students learn better from someone who just went through it themselves." Over the following weeks, the old landing field transformed. Draic engineers worked with the human children to improve the ramp systems, making them stronger and more adjustable. Dr. Mills established a medical station on site. Voren created safety teams and emergency protocols. The first official class began with 12 young Dravik, all between ages 8 and 11. Their parents watched from a designated viewing area, anxiety clear on their faces, but they watched. That was progress. Ben and Lucy led the warm-up exercises, demonstrating proper wing stretches and muscle conditioning. Cyril, Nadra, and Tovik assisted, moving between students to offer encouragement in correct form. That young female named Lisa stood at the smallest ramp, barely 3 ft high. Trembling with fear, her mother called out, "You don't have to do this if you're scared, darling." But Lisa looked at Cyril, who had done this same exercise weeks ago. "Were you scared your first time?" "Terrified," Cyril admitted. "But Lucy told me that being scared just means you're trying something important. And she was right behind me the whole time, making sure I was safe." Lucy walked up beside Lisa. "Now, I'll be right here if you want to wait. That's okay. If you want to try, I'll spot you. Your choice." Lisa took a deep breath, spread her small wings, and walked to the edge of the ramp. She stood there for a long moment, gathering courage. Then she jumped. It was barely a glide. More of a controlled fall, she was airborne for maybe 2 seconds before landing on a soft padding, but she did. She flew. The viewing area erupted. In applause, Lisa's mother had tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. One by one, the young Dravik took their turns. Some flew beautifully on the first try, others needed multiple attempts. A few decided they weren't ready and chose to wait and watch, which the instructors praised as a smart decision. That be why the end of the first day, 8 out of 12 students had completed successful glides from the lowest ramp. The other 4 had tried ground exercises and decided to build more strength before attempting flight. Voron pulled Ben aside as they were cleaning up. I owe you an apology, young human. When I first saw what you'd done, I thought you were reckless fools. I was wrong. You were just protecting the hatchlings, sir, Ben replied. Same as we were, just in a different way, perhaps. Voron said, but you saw potential where we only saw risk. That's a valuable gift. As the sun set over Verdant Ridge, the new flight academy stood as proof that 2 different cultures could learn from each other, that children could teach adults, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone else's wings to carry them. 3 months had passed since the flight academy officially opened, and the old landing field looked completely different. Professional ramp systems stood in graduated heights. Safety nets hung at strategic points. Small building housed medical supplies, equipment storage, and a classroom for theoretical instruction. A scheduled board showed training times for different age groups. Most importantly, the sky above the field was full of young Draic practicing their flight skills. Lucy stood in the landing zone with her clipboard, timing a student named Pell as he attempted his first long-distance glide. Pell was a nervous hatchling who had taken weeks of ground training before feeling ready to fly. Today was his breakthrough moment. 30 seconds, Lucy called out as Pell soared overhead. You're doing amazing. Remember to check your wing angle. Pell adjusted smoothly, his confidence growing with each second he stayed airborne. He lined up his landing approach and touched down with only a slight stumble. His face split into a huge grin. I did it, did you see? Stayed up for 30 seconds. Lucy ran over and high-fived him carefully. You absolutely did. That was a perfect glide. How'd it feel? Like everything made sense, Pell said, his voice full of wonder. Like my wings finally got to do what they were always meant to do. Nearby, Ben worked with a group of advanced students on turning techniques. Cyril had progressed so much that she now assisted with teaching these classes. She demonstrated a banking turn while explaining the theory behind it. You have to trust your tail, Cyril told the watching student. It's not just decoration, it helps you steer. Small movements make big differences in the air. One of the students, a male named Trix, attempted the maneuver. His first try was wobbly, but his second attempt was nearly perfect. Cyril cheered for him, and Ben marked his progress in the official training log. The program had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. Word had spread to other colonies about the success at Vern Ridge. 3 other settlements had reached out asking for guidance in starting their own flight meets. Ben and Lucy had spent hours on video calls, sharing the materials and answering questions. Dr. Mills had published a medical paper on safe flight training for young Dravik using data collected from the academy. Her research showed that with proper preparation and progressive training, hatchlings as young as 8 could safely learn basic flight skills with no increased injury risk compared to traditional methods. The paper had caused controversy in some Drake communities, but it had also sparked conversations about tradition versus adaptation. Wraith visited the academy regularly now, often bringing other DRAC leaders to observe the program in action. Today he arrived with a delegation from a neighboring colony who seemed skeptical about the whole concept. This is highly irregular, one of the visiting leaders said, watching young hatchlings soar through practice courses, allowing children to fly so young goes against centuries of our cultural wisdom. I thought the same thing 3 months ago, Wraith admitted. Watch for a while, then decide. They watched as Nadra, now one of the Academy star students, performed a complex aerial routine she'd choreographed herself. She combined glides, turns, and altitude changes in a flowing sequence that looked almost like a dance. When she landed gracefully in the center of zone, even the skeptical visitors looked impressed. How old is she? One visitor asked. 9 years old. Wraith replied, she's been training for 3 months. Patricia Hayes joined the group, greeting the visitors warmly. What you're seeing is the result of combining Draic physical capabilities with human teaching methodology. Neither species could have achieved this alone. Vor approached with his daily safety report. No injuries today, actually. We've gone 47 days without any injury. More serious than a scraped claw. Our safety record exceeds most adult Dravic flight training programs. The visiting leaders exchanged surprised glances. One of them asked, how is that possible with such young students? Because we teach them to respect their limits, Lucy explained, overhearing the question. We teach them that saying, I'm not ready yet, is just as important as saying I can do this. Nobody gets pushed. Everyone progresses at their own pace. Amy demonstrated this principle by working with a hatchling named Sarah, who had decided she needed more ground training before attempting the next level. Instead of pressuring her, Amy praised her self-awareness and helped her develop a strengthening routine to prepare for future success. Kala arrived to pick up Cyril at the end of the training session. She'd become one of the Academy's biggest supporters after seeing how much her daughter had flourished. Now she volunteered several hours each week helping with administrative tasks and parent outreach. How is she today? Kala asked. Ben, fantastic. Ben replied, she's really becoming an excellent teacher. The younger students look up to her. Cyril ran over to her mother, wings still quivering with excitement from the day's activities. Mama Hell did his first long glide today. I helped him practice his approach angle and he was so brave. Kala wrapped a wing around her daughter affectionately. I'm proud of you, little one, not just for your flying but for helping others find their wings too. As the day session ended, students and instructors gathered for the closing circle, a tradition started by the human children. Everyone shared one thing they'd learned or accomplished that day. It helped build community and allowed quieter students to be heard. Today, young Lissa spoke up. I learned that falling isn't failing. I crashed 3 times today, but Lucy told me that every crash teaches you something, so learned 3 new things about landing. The circle laughed warmly, and Lisa beamed at the acceptance when it came To Tov's turn, he said, I learned that teaching is harder than doing. I tried to explain wing positioning to a new student and I couldn't find the right words. It made me appreciate our instructors more. Finally, Ben spoke for the human children. We learned that we're not the teachers here anymore. We're just part of the team. You've all taught us as much as we taught you. The circle broke up with students and instructors mingling, sharing notes, and making plans for tomorrow's sessions. The visiting Dravik leader stood with Wraith, watching the easy friendship between the two species. This is remarkable, one visitor admitted. I came here expecting to see reckless endangerment. Instead, I see community. That's exactly what it is, Wraith agreed. The flight training is important, yes, but what these young ones have built together is bigger than learning to fly. They've shown us a new way forward. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, a group of young Dravik gathered. At the highest ramp, they'd earned the right to fly from this height, having mastered all the lower levels. Cyril, Nadra, and Tovik were among them, preparing for one final glide before day's end. Lucy and Ben stood at the bottom, ready to observe and ensure safety, but they weren't needed. Not really. The young Dravik knew what to do. One by one, the students launched themselves into the evening air. Their wings caught the golden light as they soared in formation, calling out to each other with joy. They flew in circles above the academy, celebrating another successful day. Patricia stood with Wraith, watching the beautiful sight. 3 months ago, this seemed impossible. 3 months ago, I would have called it dangerous and foolish, Wraith said. Now, I wonder how we ever thought keeping them grounded was the answer. He paused, then added quietly, your human children taught us something profound. They taught us that protecting someone doesn't mean stopping them from flying. It means teaching them to fly safely. And your young ones taught our children something too, Patricia replied. They taught them that having knowledge means nothing if you don't use it to help others. As darkness fell over Verdant Ridge, the lights came on around the Flight Academy. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, and new achievements. The academy had become more than just a place to learn flight techniques. It had become proof that different species, different cultures, and different ways of thinking could come together to create something neither could build alone. In the distance, the last of the young flyers landed safely. Their laughter echoed across the field as they congratulated each other on another day of reaching for the sky. Human children and Dravik hatchlings walked together toward their homes, already planning tomorrow's adventures. The dragon children had disappeared that morning 3 months ago. They'd been found laughing as human kids helped them fly, and in the process, they'd all learned the most important lesson of all, that the strongest wings are built on trust, friendship, and the courage to help each other soar.